Morning. Am I coming out on the mic okay? All right, great. So how many of you were at the New York Consensus Conference? Just a couple of you? I was there last week. I got to tell you that I'm very relieved and refreshed to see the practicality concerning blockchain that I've seen here over the past couple of days. Most of the time, if you're following blockchain, you know that it's going to solve world hunger. It's going to create world peace. These are all the things associated to blockchain. Now, I am in charge of the Business Transformation and Innovation Division, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about innovation, what we do. I'm going to talk to you a lot about what we do with blockchain. And I got one more question that I did want to ask everybody here. How many of you are on the business side of the house? Not just straight technical, okay? So I act as a consultant within the agency. I usually do a lot of work, because I did a lot of work on ACE, as you've heard, for many years, spent 14 years, 6 of them on single window. But one of the things that I hear people often say, and I don't put it down because I've said it myself, is that the smart people in the house are on the technical side. Well, guess what? You need to be the smart people in the house, okay? Because if you put all your eggs in one basket on the technical side, what's going to happen is you're going to be spending money like you've never thought you could spend before. Okay, we're in the process of looking at a very new product. Now, it's not new conceptually. I don't know if you know this, but blockchain's been around for, well, distributive has been around for about 20 years. But Bitcoin really put it into production, right? In fact, do you know most often what people think I do when I tell them that I'm involved with blockchain? They think I'm a Bitcoin miner. Right? I walk out there and I'm like, yeah, I'm doing blockchain. Oh, the government's going into Bitcoin. They're getting coins. I'm like, no. We're talking supply chain. Then all of a sudden they have no idea what I'm talking about. All right. So at the Consensus Conference last week, a couple of interesting things. It's already been stated. I think Peter said there was like 8,000 people that showed. Somebody else said 7,000. My number was 7,800. I don't know which one's fake news and which one's real news. But I will tell you that there was a tremendous amount of people there. And they covered everything. They had supply chain. They had security commission. In fact, a couple of the Chinese groups were trying to reach me because they thought I was on the exchange commission. I'm not sure what that actually was amounting to. But they were trying to contact me based on the security commission. So it was very interesting. But the most interesting stat that I heard, do you know that the adoption rate over the course of the year was by private industry in blockchain is 1% increase. And I want to discuss a little bit why that is, because what happens as a business person is you say, hey, you know, I want to get this project done. All you have to do is, my least favorite word being in IT, is just do this. The technical folks, when they start looking at blockchain, start going, you want me to do what? Right? Because it is a major investment up front into a technology that could offer some great benefits in the long run. But you have to really have that long pole view. And I want to encourage you as a business user to have that long pole view. All right, let me get to the next slide here. So what does my innovation group do? I'm just going to digress for just a second and give you a little bit of information. We started in November of 2017. I only had about 3 people. I'm now up to around 9. I'm going to be moving to, I think, around 11 people to roll out this division. We're broken up into 2 different areas. One is the emerging requirements, where we actually do our acquisition area. And then there's the innovation. Innovation is brand spanking new for the Office of Trade. And we're having a great time doing it. We're looking at blockchain. We're looking at AI, machine learning, all sorts of interesting things. I listed some of the positions. We have a government liaison, so interagency. We want to know what other agencies are doing. We have a private industry liaison who looks at a lot of products, and we're starting to do a lot of research into that area, and a cyber specialist, which I just recently hired. Obviously, we're trying to produce that futuristic vision, because one of the things that I find with innovation is that a lot of innovation offices get stuck in the 0 to 5 year. So what they start to do is they start fixing things that everybody wants to fix, and they may do it in an innovative way, and they call it innovation. But really what you want to do with an innovation group is start looking at what is beyond that 5-year mark. What are the technologies that private industry is starting to invest in? What are the potential areas that are going to start coming down the pike? Because customs in its past has always been reactive. We started to become proactive with ACE. In fact, one of the greatest compliments I ever had was the private sector telling us to slow down because we adopted Agile. You all familiar with Agile? It's the greatest thing since sliced bread, right? You know what? We used to do that 10 years ago, right? We did that before Agile was even known. We just didn't have the Kanbans and all the fancy stuff that they talk about. We used to go to a bar and fight it out, right? Write it down, requirements on a napkin, but you had the group there, right? Now, I'm not putting down Agile. Agile has been absolutely the best. Waterfall took its place. Unfortunately, we fell backwards a little bit, and then we came back to Agile, and I absolutely love it. At one point, we were running 3 or 4 teams. I was running 3 or 4 teams at the same time. Thankless job as a product owner if you've ever done it. But anyway, the biggest thing that I want you to know from this slide is that what the government's doing right now, and I think it's wonderful, is fail fast methodology. All right? You can't lose with fail fast. If I can spend $50,000 to prove something out, as opposed to $50 million, I've already saved the government money and the taxpayers' money. The other thing is, if it proves out and it works, I move forward with knowledge, knowing I have the confidence, and my rate of doing it right goes up, correct? Right? So we want to take both that approach and apply it in both manners, and it's working out very well for us. If you guys are all interested and you're not involved, the Trade Support Network, which is what I have listed as the TSN, and you want to see what Customs is doing, please get involved with the Trade Support Network. We're going to be having the conference in Atlanta in August, all right, this year, and there'll be some big stuff going on in blockchain will definitely be spoken about. Now, for you tech guys out there, I apologize that I am, again, giving you some basics on things that you probably already know about, but I want to talk just a little bit about it because it goes into the fail-fast methodology. We are doing proof of concepts right now. That is, proving out small pieces of code to verify whether or not something works. Everybody should be doing this, all right? If you're looking at doing something with blockchain, take a baby step. Look for something with some business value, all right? So what's the difference between a POC and a pilot, proof of concept and a pilot? A pilot, in ACE, when we would run a pilot, we would have all of the code built out already, right? So we would be testing in small areas to make sure that it worked, and then we would roll out across the country. That's really what a pilot is. The proof of concept is only proving out those small points. Okay, so again, I'm catching some of you business guys up to make sure that you understand this. Now here's the interesting thing, and I hate to admit this, but since my group is so new, I have no budget. I can't invest in anything, and I'm an innovation group. So we got to start somewhere. Thankfully, DHS has budget, and we're able to creatively use them to help us with our proof of concepts. So they've come in and helped us with the proof of concept. They're actually building a piece for us. We do a modified version of what we're currently doing. And then the biggest thing is that the code may never be utilized. So what we've put up may come down and never be used again. There's nothing wrong with that because it's a small piece. CBP, once it gets in and looks at it, may have to take all those requirements that were useful to us and then expand upon it to fit within their system parameters, okay? So at the end of all this, we'll do a policy, legal, and technical assessment. I don't know that the private industry has to do it as much as we do. I'm assuming they do, but the big thing is it could take regulations 15, 18 months to get put in place. So if we test something out and we want to do it, we may not be able to move right away unless we do something as a test as opposed to production. And then getting the legal assessment. Big thing in my legal people, I want them to review with blockchain is whether or not blockchain is good, better or just as good as a signature, right? Because if we want to get rid of those products and we can verify who they are, then can I get rid of that signature on the piece of paper? Ultimately, the agency, after looking at what we've done on the assessment, which will come from the trade and the government, right? Our trade partners will make that assessment and they'll decide whether or not they want to invest. It could be that we love the technology, but we didn't like the business piece that we did. It could be the other way around. Technology doesn't work, business piece works, or it could be we don't want to go any further with it. So we're really looking at this very closely. And I hope that this is actually optimistic for you on what the government's doing. So now I want to get into the meat and potatoes. And Daryl, please keep me honest on time. I have a tendency to talk a little bit more than I should. I'm very quiet at home, but you put me on stage and I can't seem to stop. So I apologize. So how does decentralized data, how does it affect us when you're in a law enforcement agency? I can't do what Bitcoin does, right? Bitcoin lets everybody know, whoever's on that blockchain, know what's going on transactionally. But I have an issue, right? Or any law enforcement agency has an issue. We have to protect our trade partners because we don't want to give away corporate secrets. You know, I don't know that Walmart wants to share everything with Target or Amazon for that matter, right? So we have to look at ways around that. The other role that we play in innovation, my team plays, is to sort through the hype. How did I start it off? We're going to solve world hunger, right? Obviously, we can't do some of those things. If you think about what's being promised and what you're seeing, there's some social stuff going on right now. But let's say I had a hunter that shoots a deer, and we want to track that to the plate of the consumer. How practical is that to enforce? I take a picture as the hunter of the deer. I take it from 17 different angles, and each one is a new deer. I may not have shot the deer that I'm sending you. How are you going to verify that? Okay? This is a government issue as well as a private industry issue, and we've got to be aware of what's going on within the technology to see what we can get to. Because the tendency is to think on the business side that all our operational issues are going to be done with. Right? New technology equals less operational issues. It only pushes it back from my perspective. So we're sorting through that hype. You got to understand the viability of the technology. What is it that the technology does? One of the best explanations I think that I can give you if you're on the business side is think of Dropbox. Okay? When you put a document on Dropbox, it's available to everyone all at the same time. I'll come back to why that's important. But that's what blockchain is doing for you. It's letting all of your group know what's going on at the same time. And there is value in that from a business perspective. Obviously, I already talked about the proof of concepts. Now, what do we have to look at within our proof of concept? Interoperability. That's been a word that's happened over the past couple of days. I was almost on my knees thanking God that you guys said interoperability. I went out to New York, and do you know how many times I heard interoperability? Zero, except for, I'm sorry, once. Once, and it was by the DHS Science and Technology Group talking about the importance of it. The internet took off because of interoperability. It doesn't matter if you're on a Mac or an IBM. It doesn't matter if you have a large enterprise or a small little home network. You all get on the network, right? You all are able to go and use the internet. We want this for blockchain. And there's a war going on right now. Don't kid yourselves. The software companies are out there fighting each other to gain as much ground as possible and put other companies out of business. That's all fine and dandy, but we got to watch out for that because we know what's going to open the market is interoperability. And the government is actually on that right now. Data correlation. Very, very, very important when you're dealing with large groups of people. Remember, I mentioned Bitcoin. Bitcoin, again, everybody sees everything. Government can't do that. So we got to use a different approach in order to understand that data correlation. How do I put data out on the blockchain so that it's useful, but hide enough of it so that people can't go in, and I'm going to use mining in a different way, mine it and start figuring out corporate secrets. Because the last thing I want to do is promote corporate espionage, right? I don't want to be the garbage pail for somebody else to go figure out what's going on. I don't know if you guys all read those articles where people used to go through corporate paper documents and you guys are all tired. Okay. So we take a hybrid approach. And then obviously we got to look for a business use case. Don't just go out and get something. Get something that could potentially enhance your business. A lot of agencies that I'm talking to right now who have started on blockchain are just doing it because somebody up high said, hey, we need to do blockchain. Well, what does it do for you? Because if you don't have interoperability and you're a government agency and you want to start including somebody on something, and you've already decided that this is the software you're going to use, you're now going to tell 5,000 people, I don't care what you've invested into, you better buy my software so that we can talk to each other? That doesn't work. So what you're doing is you're investing into something that's going to put you into a corner if you don't have the interoperability. This is why I'm happy to be working with DHS-S&T. Now, one major misconception, and I'm glad that I have the shipping group here because I think you guys will understand this very well. It's not just shipping, folks. Okay? Blockchain isn't here just to solve shipping. I know this is the major focus, but you have a problem once you get into across the borders, don't you? It's called 47 government agencies that you have to deal with on the laws, the rules, and the regulations. If you neglect to look at that aspect of it, you don't see the full power of blockchain. I will tell you that right now. You've got to look beyond shipping. The two universes are going to have to come together. I know how this can work. I've been in ACE long enough to see how we can do this. I just can't tell you because then I have to shoot all of you. No, I'm kidding. But it is a very difficult task. It's going to take a very long time for us to fully realize that. So we'll be focusing on niche programs in the beginning to do the prove-outs and then slowly starting to convert over. I will probably say that over the next 4 to 5 years, you'll start seeing more and more people get really involved in starting to understand what blockchain can do. Make sure that you understand what I just said because that misconception has got to be promulgated through to the tech companies because the tech companies are not thinking along those lines. They're thinking about how to get money. They're thinking about what they can do. And you need to, as a business person, make sure that they understand everything. So how do we start looking at blockchain? I actually hate this word right now, trust. Because it is, you talk to a business person about trust, hey, I trust my wife. I trust that most of my kids, all right? I trust certain people. When they're in blockchain, you're not really talking about that kind of trust, but everybody thinks that because it's difficult to hack into, that the trust is that you can trust anything that goes on in blockchain, right? So that's somewhat naive, right? What we're talking about is transactional trust. So if one side says that I've got this transaction, and then I've got another side that says I've got this transaction, we know that that transaction actually happened, right? But we're not talking about the kind of trust that everybody's thinking about. Remember, I was talking about entities before. So if I had somebody that comes on board, and I don't truly know who they are, and I haven't validated them, how do I know that they are who they are? It doesn't solve that problem. If it does, please let me know because I'll invest right away, okay? And the third-party softwares that offer the validations, not always so accurate. So how do we get to accuracy? Ironically, I do think blockchain can get us there at some point. It's very, very feasible. The basic principles of good development don't change with whatever technology you take on. Garbage in, garbage out, you've got to understand that, all right? So how do you manage the trust? You've got to start looking deeper into the validations, okay? You've got to look at where you're getting your information from. Now, I can tell you, I'm going to use two words that are not blockchain that I've kind of made up as I've gone along, but I want to talk to you a little bit about what do we do with blockchain in general. Well, there's two ways to engage with it. You could be actively engaging in blockchain, which means that you control it, who comes on board, or you could be passive, meaning that you're just a player. So if I use the Walmart example and the government comes onto the Walmart blockchain, I wouldn't be telling people that they should go on there or not. I'd just be taking the data. Now, I would have a certain amount of legitimacy because if Walmart says that their suppliers are who they are, who am I to say that they're not? So that works too, all right? So entity identification, I think, is one of the biggest issues out there for all of us, and I think we need to start looking at that as well. In fact, I have some concepts I'm starting to talk about. Can't talk about it right now because it's, again, under wraps, but those are things that we're starting to look into as an innovation group, all right? So anyway, don't say trust, say validate, okay? Tracking, everybody's into tracking. It's very good. The government interest is on origin data. Where is it made? We want to get as close to origin as possible. We want to know that it actually comes from the country that it comes from. And who is it made by? Those are very, very important questions. But the shipment tracking that you've all been talking about the past couple of days that started by the carriers is good, but what would be better? At least from the government standpoint, I'd like to know when it leaves the manufacturer's presence. I want to know about the bicycle rider down in Thailand. I want to know all those groups. I want to know how it's moving. Blockchain, I think, will put that together for us eventually. All right, but I want to know all the movements. Because if I see something that looks a little bit odd, then we can tackle it, okay, if it looks out of whack. Real quick, I'm going to digress just for a second again. I met with DHS&T. I was doing a tour of duty with them for about 6 months. And we went and how many of you know those smart devices that you can put on the trucks now, and you can put them on the containers, right? And they know temperatures, they know all these readings, right? So everybody out there seems to think that the government wants hundreds of thousands of blips on a screen because I need a Christmas tree in front of me on a map, right? It doesn't do anything for me, quite honestly. There might be some trend data that I can do. But I can't take operational personnel, sit them down in front of the hundreds of thousands of blips and say, go, can I? So I said to them, this is not going to sell. I said, if you really want to sell this, you got to start finding some operational requirements where they can get down into the exceptions. So sure enough, we met with the operational personnel. They reacted exactly the way that I said they would. Now, I've been a business engineer for a long time, so I started facilitating the discussion. We started talking a little bit about what they need. They came up with 2 requirements that took them from the hundreds of thousands down to the onesies and twosies, like that, because there is a need for that kind of view. We want to get into that area, which raises another big question that we'll talk about in a little bit for blockchain. The biggest value that I see in blockchain is not really the first 2, although I think they're going to mature. The last one is the place that I think that you're going to gain the most value. Right now, when you're making entry into the United States, it focuses all of the data into one centralized area, which is either your broker or your self-filer, your importer. Everything funnels into there. So all the documents, the partner government agency requirements, all of those are in that arena. If blockchain works out to its potential, and every group that's involved in the process puts in its own data, I want you to think about the importer's responsibility as far as storage, as far as maintenance, suddenly goes down immeasurably, right? Because what's happening is that document that they needed to store and make sure that the broker had and had to keep track of, and it traveled along with the shipment for I don't know how many ports before it got to them, no longer needs to be uploaded. Because if you got the manufacturer and the supplier giving you the data, you know it's there. And something that's not talked about often with blockchain, retention periods. If you're on the hook for 5 years, you retain the data for 5 years, and then you let it go. You'd be under legal requirements. Start thinking along those lines. Nothing can be indefinite. You're not going to have the computer power to look through everything over 100 years worth of data, right? So nothing I'm saying should cause anybody any problems, but it's stuff to start thinking about and start looking at from a business perspective. It will reduce paper, reduce storage, operational pieces, and then every piece of the chain is contributing. So that's how we're starting to see this. One of the biggest misconceptions, and forgive me if you know the person who stated this, because when I was in New York, I almost fell off my chair. But they were talking about the sovereignty of countries. And they want to get rid of that. They want to make one homogeneous world of shipping and entry. It's not feasible. I'm going to give you a very simple example. If you had a pest that you wanted to keep out of the US, right? Just a pest, a bug. And another country has that pest because it's native, you already got a problem, right? You can't just say, hey, country A, you got to enforce my laws, or we're no longer to enforce my laws, because it may blow my whole ecosystem up. We've already seen it happen, right, with a couple of these different pests. All right, it's just not that easy. And that's a simple example. 47 agencies worth of rules and regulations are not going to change overnight. Sovereignty is going to stay where it is. And it is that merging of the entry data, starting to look at standardization across, like WCO models and shipping data that we really need to focus in on. What's going to happen if blockchain takes off is it's not going to affect what we collect. Those are going to stay in place. It's going to be how we collect it. There are entities that are not participating right now. They're just paper products moving back and forth. But once those companies, those smaller niche companies start getting involved, it will change the way we look at blockchain. So what are the hurdles? Government's got to be practical, right? And this is something that I want the business side to understand. First of all, the hype. The hype is incredible. Okay, you need to weave through it. One of the biggest things, and again, this is my third misconception, and this is one of the things that I just stated earlier with the deer example. You have to be able to enforce what it is that you're doing to sustain it. Not just do something for PR purposes, right? And we're seeing a lot of that now. Probably the healthiest piece that we're seeing in blockchain right now is the Walmart piece that's going on with food, right? Maersk, IBM, I know that they're doing with blockchain, but a lot of what they're doing on that program isn't actually blockchain. It's transactional. Now, I know they're making some move to convert it, but a lot of that stuff, they're looking at multiple technologies. We really need to mature this. All right, obviously, we're lacking that interoperability. If you are a tech person, please get involved with W3C and GS1 and start looking at what is being championed by DHS Science and Technology now. They're working with Digital Bazaar, B-A-Z-A-A-R, who has got years of experience in this. And part of what we're doing right now is testing that out, that interoperability piece. We are not, as the government, in a position to market somebody's software. And you shouldn't be either. You should be making these demands on your technical side. The big thing, again, I already talked about this, that what I see right now is that blockchain is starting to really just push everything back just a little bit. We've really got to take a look at the identification of entities and what validates them. And I'm not just talking about the big guys. Those are easy, right? But I'm talking about somebody who's been in business for 30 days. Who are the entities surrounding them? Do they have other businesses they're involved in? These are things that we're interested in. The one thing that I never hear in any blockchain conference that I go to or even speak at is the word management. We've got an issue here that's much bigger than we're expecting. Somebody on the panel yesterday, I think, mentioned 8 blockchains. There he is. How are you, sir? 8 blockchains. You got it easy, my friend. I'm probably going to be in the thousands if you think about it. So how do I technically manage that? DHS S&T is trying to help me with it, because I'm not going to be a participant in everything. The automotive industry right now, I think I read this article a couple of months ago, automotive industry is racing to get to blockchain. This is what I was reading. If you just think about their parts, just that alone, and how much data is there, because what they want to know is if I've got part A coming in and I need part B, there's a dependency. I can't start production until those 2 parts come in, right? So blockchain, they're looking at to be able to follow everything. And what happens is if I know part B isn't going to come in, maybe I do production on something else until that part B comes in and I keep my production line moving. But just that alone, think about how huge that data, how much data that is. And then what do I choose out of it? Now on a business end, how do I manage that operationally? How do I know when something is not quite right on that blockchain and I need to go in and figure out where that data is a problem? How do I get my personnel in there? All right? All of that's got to be worked out. We're going to start with baby steps and start getting bigger and bigger. All right, so what are we doing now? NAFTA, CAFTA. Everybody hear about NAFTA, CAFTA in the news? That's being mentioned a lot. Things can change. We're not too concerned with the changes coming down the pike right now. And for some reason, I can't get this page to turn. There we go. All right. So obviously, NAFTA-CAFTA, a very important small piece that we're doing, entitles somebody who makes the claim to not have to pay duty. All right? So they go in there, they do the NAFTA-CAFTA, they make whatever pronouncement they need to. Customs takes that in and says, okay, it's duty-free. All right? And they give you back the money. It's mainly a paper process. Would you believe that the government is still using snail mail? You do? Oh, shocker, huh? So not everybody's automated. There is an automated portion of this in the automated commercial environment in ACE. Now, I didn't build that, but somebody can actually sit there, get online in ACE, and upload documents. They can scan them in, upload them into the ACE portal. Now, so what are we looking at with this test? One, obviously, the interoperability. It's the biggest thing that we're testing out on this piece. Our hybrid approach, is it working? I had a meeting with my trade partners, and we've got some pretty big guns in there, and we were talking about just that fact. We want to make sure that people are comfortable that we're not giving away trade secrets. Okay? And then what are the advancements over the paper and automation processes? This is something, again, I'm going to reiterate to my business folks. You need to understand what the blockchain technology is. You need to test blockchain technology. Don't get rooked into thinking that you don't need to know anything about this, that you just need to run a test on it. You need to have business value. I had a guy at the New York conference pull me to the side. He was in between some big companies. I think Accenture was on one side, IBM was on another, and they weren't visiting him. So the next thing I know, the hook comes out and he pulls me over. He says, hey, Vincent, I got to tell you about my product. Of course, I'm sitting there going, listen, I understand blockchain. I went through all the issues that I just went through with you, and I watched his face drop as I talked to him about it, but I don't want to just get pulled in. You've got to understand there's a lot of snake oil out there because the hype is so good right now. It's like, I'm going to date myself, but back in the days when we were worried that the world was going to come to an end because of the date, it was going to change to the year 2000, Y2K. We all remember that? Some of you old cronies. The world was going to end. Microsoft is going to blow up. Do you know how much money people made? What was the matter with me? I could have made millions at that point. I could have just said, hey, Y2K, I built the company, and then that would have been it. And that's what's happening now. They're pulling you in, and the industry has done something very unfair. Don't confuse open source with interoperability. Open source, you can put it on any machine, right? But they won't talk to each other because they don't want the business side right now to control it. They want the technical side to say, hey, we got that ground, and we're going to make it, all right? Now, again, this is not unusual in the industry, so I'm actually not putting them down. This is very usual. The government's got to come in and start setting some standards. So in NAFTA-CAFTA, we're taking a look at what is it like for us now to take that paper in through the blockchain, actually not paper, but a digital expression of that paper, instantaneously have it there up front, as opposed to sending out a request to the industry that can go through snail mail and take days to get a return on, months maybe. Not only is it instantaneous, but if any of you are familiar with this, we use what's called the CF28, Customs Form 2829 process to get information out of it. But if I have everybody on the blockchain and the supplier is giving me, or the manufacturer is giving me the data, remember that Dropbox that I was talking about prior? Now, all of a sudden, when they send the data, they're doing their job. Instead of sending the paper with the shipment, they're doing their job. They're sending the digital expression over. I inform the importer, the broker, and the government all at the same time. Voila. Okay? That's where you're starting to find your enhancements. I get rid of that CF2829 process because since everybody's there, if I need more information, I send one event message. Boom. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Importer, you're responsible for getting me more data because I got to look further into this. I no longer have to worry about the snail mail, the uploading. What they do is they send me back a secure link that only the government can see, encrypted, and I hit that link, and in the background, those documents are now made available to my operators. Do you know that my operators have no idea that blockchain is happening? Because that's the way it should be. All they know is they're getting the data that they need to do their job, all right? Because we don't build systems to actually replace people We build systems as tools for people to use to make their job easier. That's really what it's about, folks. We're not going to have an industry that's going to have no jobs in the next 5 years. If you're even thinking that way, talk to me like my son's sons. We're always going to have some kind of job available to us. They're tools. All right? And then obviously, we do a complete assessment from the top down. Our trade partners, again, we have some very big partners involved looking at this along with us. Test the viability. Government may disagree with the private sector. Private sector may disagree with the government. It doesn't matter. We'll take it all in. We'll really do an assessment, and we'll allow the agency to make a better decision. All right, what's on deck? What else is coming up? I got some cool stuff. Daryl, how am I doing on time? Oh, cool. All right, I'm doing pretty good. What's that? Oh, I'll hurry up then. All right. All right, so the last piece, and this is some cool stuff that I have. We're looking at IPR. And I apologize. I put international. I was in a rush. I wasn't thinking. It's intellectual property rights, trademark. Okay? So you guys all know what Yeti is, right? Yeti makes those really cool, expensive igloos and cups and stuff like that. So let's say they want to apply to customs and have customs help protect their trademark. So we can watch those goods coming in and make sure that they're viable. So right now we have a system that does that, but it only gets one generation in, right? So it tells you that Yeti has licensing control over their products and that they want to protect it. But what if I can get to the licensors and the licensees? Now this is complicated because what happens is usually you don't just become a licensee. You can be a licensor that then licenses out again. So you can grant rights. So it can get 7, 8 generations down because somebody may license to import, right? But they need several manufacturers in order to make different products. Maybe to keep it simple, they want one manufacturer to make the igloos and another one to make the hot and cold mugs, right? So they've got to go out to these groups. That's where it starts getting complicated. Now here's the cool part. I'm going to take some other technology. My group's going to take some other technology, and we're going to start looking at how we infiltrate that into the blockchain process. So the first part, not so much blockchain oriented, but it takes 150 pages of guides in some cases to know how things work. You ladies, what do you buy? Carriage bags? What's the big one? What's a big one? Expensive, $1,000 handbag. Louis Vuitton? Prada? All right, so let's say you get that $1,000 bag, right? Now, you know you go to Nordstrom's, it's $1,000. But you go to this little off-the-wall place, and they've got it for 150 bucks. And your husband right now, ladies, is going, man, I want to get that one. Right? So we want to do a consumer app, an end-user app, that would allow us to hook up our blockchain into a social piece that would allow them to know, one, is something protected, and two, if it's protected. Now, I haven't worked this out yet, but can it be authenticated? Okay? Because if I can get the enforcement of customs and the social conscience of America behind me, oh my goodness, are we going to change things? Blockchain will allow that, and it will allow us to do it safely. Now, I'm thinking a little bit beyond that, but if the person was to make a purchase and that purchase could be tied to the product so that even at the point that they sell it again, because what the wife now says, you know what, I like that $1,000 bag, but I really like this $2,000 bag. But husband says, you know what, you got to sell that $1,000 bag so that we can buy the $2,000 bag, okay? So you sell it and you have an authentication key and it follows the product. I don't know if that's going to happen, but it's something that we're thinking about. This is the government talking. Okay? But it's really cool stuff, right? And this is part of, again, having that foresight, that long pole view. Other two pieces, if you're into the oil industry, we're looking at pipeline. I'm just starting discussions with them because out on the market, the barrels are traded so often that they can't keep track of it. So we're going to look at blockchain potentially. Timber, we're starting to look at for illegal shipments because it can fuel a lot of illegal activities, the sale of timber. Not too many people think about that. But if you think again socially, if the rainforests are getting cut down and we're able to do a better job on that, maybe we can slow down that area. Okay? I'm going to end it with that. I just want to say thank you very much for having me, and I'll take any questions that I can answer without giving up any top secret detail.
Okay, great. So thank you for that insight and for sharing your experience with us. I think it was very, very well thought out and very, very timely for this audience as well. I have a couple of questions for you. One question is, what is your involvement with the universities and academia relative to your research and innovation?
I am a secondary player right now in the university area. I rely on DHS Science and Technology to actually round up or herd up the universities and send proposals forward. I was talking to Larry earlier, and one of the things that I'd like to see, not this year because we're so brand spanking new, but next year, is starting to dialogue with the universities because, and we're doing this with businesses as well, but why do you have to come to give me a proposal? If you're in a think tank scenario and you don't actually understand fully the operational values that Customs is looking for, maybe it's better for us to have that dialogue first. And then you could take a look at what our needs are, and then put the creativity around it. Now, that's not to say that we don't get good concepts. I don't want to take that out. We do, and sometimes there is definitely room for seeing things that we haven't seen before. But I think those dialogues are a healthy way to start it.
Okay. The next question is, if blockchain interoperability is the biggest issue, what platform components are best starting points?
You know what? I have the, whoever sent me that question, I could send it out to the group. I have the breakdown on the identifiers that we need to do, and I just don't have it off the top of my head. So if it's okay, I can send it out to the group after the fact. Okay, great. What other questions do we have in the room? The mic's available in the middle. If you have some questions, why don't you come on up, or I can meet you halfway, or. Yeah, don't be shy. I don't bite. Unless you're paying me to. I think Daryl's got a live mic.
That one should be live.
Yep. Could you just talk a little bit more about the NAFTA certification project?
Okay.
So in other words, right now, I'm filing it, you know, if I were participating in this program, or, you know, just a general running the business, I file my NAFTA certificate. But do you have the underlying entries staged up on the blockchain where, you know, I got to get a correct entry number and all the other data pieces need to match up?
Yeah, thank you for asking that, because I did skip over that aspect. I wasn't sure how much you would understand it, so I glossed over it. We actually have, what we're doing is a modified entry summary. So the team went through, including myself, and we looked at the most pertinent data that we needed to get a smaller version of an entry summary. Now, these entry summaries can be huge. So we just wanted to get very simple stuff moving forward. So if you're familiar with the A to Z set and the Kater, we did some header data, and we did the full line data. And then what we've done is, are you familiar with the SPI? Okay, so it's a special indicator for NAFTA. We've taken that, and we're actually going to hyperlink the SPI into the blockchain data. And then what happens is we're building it separately in a DHS system to avoid all of our firewall issues, right? And when we get that data, the user will be able to, it has to be something that's already been submitted. So they'll look into ACE, verify that they have everything. They cannot do any enforcement off of what's being submitted by our testers. They can only do that in ACE. And they'll do an actual side-by-side comparison. Another cool fact, I don't know if you're interested in this, but you know the Cs are set up, centers of excellence are set up across the US. So we don't have to go to a specific port anymore. We can just do this stuff virtually. So I've just asked the operational staff to give me some good people that can be open-minded as to what we're doing and look at the potential value of it. But what we are doing is cutting these things down immensely. I mean, it's moving almost to full automation. No, because it's a proof of concept and I've done 9 or less on this, there's rules because it's a test and it's not specifically CBP running it. So we met the criteria for just doing the 9. The Federal Register notice would come out if we actually decide to invest in it. Okay? Okay. Thank you for asking that.
Okay. And I have one more question for you. and it is CBP working with foreign CBPs and agencies to track fraudulent packages or counterfeit goods coming in?
I think our first step into counterfeit is really going to be with the IPR process. Blockchain in and of itself is not going to eradicate counterfeit goods. We've got to put some operational value around that and start looking at it. It could reduce, definitely reduce the footprint on that illegal activity, but I think the IPR piece is going to be one of the big ones. Now, one of the things that I did neglect to mention with IPR is that it is something that is voluntary by the industry. So if they're not asking us to protect, they don't. And the other thing is, as far as IPR goes, if there's anything that is a safety hazard, lead, something hazardous, we have to enforce it no matter what. We don't want our children getting sick or you getting sick, so we do that no matter what. As far as foreign governments, I am dying to do work with foreign governments. In fact, what I'd like to see happen, and we've been working, starting to work with the WCO group within Customs right now, as I would love to see, and I don't know if this will happen, so please don't quote me. It's just speculative right now, but I would love the WCO to say, hey, we want to build a consortium for all of the foreign governments that are going to do blockchain, so that every single time they come onto a blockchain, whether it's passive or actively, we know that France is France, Australia is Australia, US is US, Japan is Japan, okay? China is China. I would love to see that start happening. I want to start looking at getting to that level where everything is starting to get spelled out in a very clear fashion. These things are going to start helping blockchain really take off. So yes, I am looking for foreign governments. We actually got called by Ghana. We were talking to a couple of other foreign governments, but we just haven't solidified anything yet. And as far as the partner government agencies go, we're on it. We're starting to talk to them. We're going to start going out to the Border Agency Executive Council and start talking to them about blockchain. So.
Great. That's all the time we have for questions this morning. Thank you, Mr. Annunziato, for your time and for sharing with us today.
Thank you.